RedlightRocket, this is a response to what is currently your latest video. Reply to me, actually, I watched your video many times, actually. The first time I watched it, I was doing something else, so I knew I'd have to watch it again, because I want to watch the whole thing. And if I watch something while I'm multitasking, I've noticed how my brain works, and, I'll see some part, some segment, catch my eye, or my ear, I get, well, both, and I'll listen to it through. But, I know I just miss other gaps, and sure enough, I listened to it again, and there were things I missed, and then I listened to it last night while I did some bills. I listened to it like 3 times over, and I've listened to it a couple times now where I just sat there and listened as well. And I'm really glad that I saturated myself with it, because, well, I had an interesting experience I often have with really intelligent things where, it sinks in. It takes a while to sink in. So, I watched and heard, especially since it was the beginning of your video, many times your comment about Lamarckian evolution and evolution of the mind. That's another thing, by the way. I wrote down all the little notes I was going to talk about, and then I didn't bring it out here. So I might miss some, but maybe that's good, because then the things that really stand out in my head, I might miss some of the things I wanted to talk about. But I guess it'll help make sure that I go with what's on my head and not some idea of what I thought would be neat to say. But I might jump around a little more. But yeah, that's really brilliant, actually. The comment on Lamarckian evolution literally applying to the evolution of the mind, or especially, let's say, the social mind, the shared, social conception, the shared worldview, the social mind, or social evolution. You're right. You're absolutely right. And it's really wonderful for me, because I have spent a lot of time. This is that other idea that I presented about physical evolution actually having a Lamarckian element where we choose our environment. That's an old idea of mine. So I've spent a lot of time with that. And so it's really refreshing to realize, yeah, you're right, with memes and the way social evolution works, it really is Lamarckian. Now, it's still not a simple-minded Lamarckian thing where like things beget like things, right? Because if you are philosophically uber liberal, you're well, not even use that. Let's say you're a communist. You can usually beget a child who might be a fascist in rebellion to you. Or if you're super, super conservative, you might have an extra liberal child. On the other hand, sometimes like does beget like. When you get a stable philosophy and you share that with your kids, if it's either, functional for them, or you're just good at indoctrination, or which I don't believe in indoctrination, but I still am trying to teach my kids things that I hope stick with them. So I would say, yeah, there is even a little bit of an element of the like. So I love that. I have to think about it more and what it really means. You also touched on another thing on that subject, which is exactly what I was trying to say, but I didn't necessarily get there, so I'll clarify a little bit, which is that animals, that the environment shapes the animal. But you're right, it's really a feedback loop, not just for humans, but for all animals. And our atmosphere is produced by previous millions of years of algae and plants outputting oxygen and so forth. The air itself is a byproduct of previous animals. So we're all living in environments that have been heavily created by living creatures, which of course are related to us. So I think that's a very interesting point. And the point I was trying to make about philosophy, how philosophy is going to get in there, is that philosophy is behind a lot of long-standing institutions. And the philosophy of hierarchical organization is really just one example of that, where the philosophy creates the environment. Because if you look at things as a hierarchy, then you react to it as a certain kind of environment. It attracts certain kinds of people that survive well in a hierarchy, and it suppresses the adaptability of those that don't survive well in the hierarchy, such as myself. That's not entirely true, actually. I do okay in hierarchy because I respect roles. But the only way I really do very well with hierarchy is because Hierarchy is this concept. It's not a real network. In every so-called hierarchy, there is another network of relationships working that's necessary to get things done. Nothing can ever work just through the hierarchy. So to me, I see the hierarchy as inherently bad because it's this false idea that justifies the concentration of power. Now, you mentioned maybe the hierarchy isn't bad if it's justified. Now, I want to say two things. One, that is the dream of meritocracy, and I, for myself, have come to the conclusion there is no such thing as meritocracy. And the reason is it's this artificial power that the hierarchy gives. See, in a true meritocracy, you should be able to lose your power once your merit wanes. And that's not how hierarchy works. Hierarchy works to solidify your power so that once the justification for it vanishes, you still have the power. The potential logical argument in favor of that is that this gives stability to the system. And I think that is legitimate, and that is why hierarchies are practical. Okay, there's a certain continuity that it brings up, and so there's a certain kind of stability because continuity, has this relationship with stability, for better or worse. So, meaning for worse being, for example, Pax. How's it pronounced? Pax Romana? Pax Romanus. Anyway, the peace that you find in the world because there's one oppressive government, you avoid the chaos of 10 oppressive governments. So there's a practical element there. But it is automatically bad because it attracts these people that just want the artificial power. Hierarchy is not just ranks either. It's not the popular, as I said in that other video, people that have extra power through their popularity because they're compelling, or they have ideas that have attracted people, or they're good organizers, or they own a property that is a good place to hold meetings, or whatever. That's different from hierarchical power, right? To have everybody, for example, there's some websites here, and to have people rise up because they're popular voices, that's not the same thing as a hierarchy, which is top down. In the hierarchy, your lieutenants are assigned to at the top, and they assign their lieutenants and so forth, and it trickles down. According to the philosophy of the hierarchy, not that it ever really works that way, but according to the philosophy of the hierarchy, that's how it goes down. So people are rising up. That's not a hierarchy. If the Williams sisters are the two best tennis players for 5 years, that's not a hierarchy. They're at the top of their game. It's not a hierarchy. And it's also not a meritocracy. Just because they're at the top of that game, should they run the U.S. Tennis Association? Well, no, they don't necessarily have those skills. They'd be good candidates because, they know something about tennis. But obviously, it would be another set of skills. Now, I use the Williams sisters, as a good example for that tennis meritocracy, because they're pretty, their dad at least is pretty business savvy. They might be good candidates actually to run the USTA. Would they want to? You see how I could talk about that, but what would be the point? My real point is that they're just trying to show that there isn't an automatic, link up of the merit in tennis to having a place in a hierarchy of running tennis as a professional sport in the U.S. Okay. So that's my thing about hierarchy, is that one, there's synonyms. There's other ways. Not all rank, not all status, not all respect is hierarchy. Now the other thing is, yes, I'm saying there's other distributed systems. Some people are better than others at things. Well, I believe in specialization. So I do believe in specialization. But look again at organic examples we have. There's a lot of them, but let's just look at the human body. The liver is not in a hierarchy above the stomach. Okay? It's not in a hierarchy above or below the brain even. If the resources get low in the body, the brain will be given the nutrients. But that's not because of a hierarchy. And that really only happens when things get really low. It doesn't happen because the brain panics and says, I'm the king, give me everything. It really would be justice. It would be that the brain gets extra energy so that it can save the rest of the body. Because maybe the brain is in service of the rest of the body in that case.